most fun films I've ever done. And it was hard work, but every minute was fun. Because everybody beside you was pushing just as hard as you were.
And what was the first time you met Josh, and what were your conversations like?
Well, it was exactly as Jack just said it. It was the enthusiasm to work with Josh. No matter what the project was going to be, the fact that it was table tennis, the fact that it was a period piece, made it all the more exciting. But Jack just said it so beautifully, man. Josh is that rare figure that inspires everyone in front of the camera, behind the camera, to give, 10,000%. And a true honor tonight, really, because I'm a late addition to this Q&A, to be next to Jack Fisk, because this man is probably the finest production designer on the planet.
I'm humbled by Timothy.
Yeah, well, I completely agree, and it was interesting watching this movie tonight again, because it reminded me so much, Jack, of the kinds of movies that you made earlier in your career, like in the 70s, when you were working with guys like, De Palma and Malick and David Lynch, these auteur-driven movies that just had so much personality behind them and so much passion behind them. And I'm wondering, it was part of the fun for you? Did this feel like you were kind of recapturing a little bit of that energy?
Yeah, Josh has that energy of the 70s directors and that excitement about film that they had. I mean, it was after Easy Rider, the studios didn't know what to make, but there were a lot of young filmmakers that had ideas, and they started making films, and it was kind of a rebirth of the film industry. And Josh brought it all back. He has that same enthusiasm for film and excitement about what he's doing, and he's a writer, director. So he and Ronnie wrote the script together, but he came into it with complete ideas of what he wanted, and you want to attach yourself to that kind of comet and just travel and have fun.
Now, I know that both of you guys are, very meticulous in terms of prep and research and all that kind of stuff. So, Timothy, what's the first thing you do when you get a character like this? Obviously, you've got to spend, as I understand it, you're spending years learning how to play table tennis. So, just talk a little bit about the prep, the learning table tennis, the figuring out the physicality of this guy. Because it was really funny, watching you walk down the hall just now. I was like, this does not seem like the same guy I've been watching in here for 2 hours. You just move completely differently. So clearly you're thinking through what this guy is, what he's going to be from his head to his feet.
Well, some of it is almost muscle memory, and as you said before in your prior question, the story wasn't laid out until 2024, or I want to say 2024. But the table tennis I knew pre-COVID, so it's just something I would play casually. I also had a number of coaches over the years. About 2 years out from the movie, the table tennis coordinator on the film, Diego Schlott, and his wife, Wei Li, became my coaches, and I worked with them ad nauseum in LA, nonstop. And then as you get closer, as you dial into the actual plot, I definitely had character references and, nonstop conversations with Josh about what he wanted the film to feel like, what he wanted Marty to feel like,
Now, I know Josh is a real cinephile. Does he have conversations with you guys about reference points or influences or other movies that he's thinking about that he kind of wants to use as a model for the kind of feeling he's going for?
I think Josh probably has a lot of references that I don't know about, but we shared street photography from the 50s and documentaries from the 50s and visited locations and talked about what they were like in the 50s. And I hardly ever use theatrical films for research, because then I think you're just degrading it every time you try to borrow from it. So I try to keep everything original. And Josh remembered New York from the 80s. I remember it from the 60s, and we were doing the 50s. So we worked together to get back there. Yeah.
Well, did you have, in terms of your reference points, I read that this guy is loosely based on a real person. I mean, how much of that did you know? Were you thinking about that or doing any research, or is this just purely based off of the script?
Yeah, I thought we weren't allowed to talk about that at first, and now everyone's talking about it. So it's definitely loosely based on this figure, Marty Supreme, who was a very charismatic figure in New York in table tennis. And if you meet a certain athlete of a certain time in New York, they all knew Marty Supreme, or I'd heard a story from him. Definitely there's film references that Josh gave me that I kind of keep close to the chest. As soon as you say one thing, then people think that was the main inspiration, But more than that, though, which I've talked about before, it's really the the sports figures I feel like I grew up on, or Michael Jordan, this documentary, The Last Dance, that I found tremendously inspiring about being on a singular pursuit. You know, this movie's about the American dream, I feel, and all of its glory and its warts. And I loved tapping into that spirit. You know, it felt like so rare in a movie. I'm so proud of this movie because it doesn't feel sentimental in a sense. And there's sentiment in it, but it's not preaching at you. I love that. You know, someone said to me, is it complicated playing someone who's maybe morally ambiguous, to put it generously? And I thought it was very freeing. You know, usually if you're the titular character in a movie, you're walking a certain moral line. You're the hero, you're redemptive. I feel like that's more constraining in a sense. This is humanity and all of its ugliness, and there's so much. We were talking about it backstage. Jack said there's a little bit of Marty in everyone. And I feel like there's a lot of Marty in everyone, you know. And certainly there is in me, you know. I hope I, you know, didn't cross people and light gas stations on fire the way he did. But I feel like there's so much I could relate to in it, you know.
And something else watching the movie again tonight, you know, that struck me, and it struck me the first time, was just, you know, how perfectly cast this movie is down to the, you know, down to the extras. I mean, it's, and the performances are incredible. And Jack, I'm wondering, for you as a production designer, how much do you think about your work in terms of helping facilitate the actor's best work? Is that something that you think about, or is it like, no, that's Josh's problem?
I'm married to an actor, and I think about it all the time, and that's why I'm in this business. I love films about characters, and I love figuring out where they came from, and helping the script, helping the actors, you know, have a, you know, when you read a script, it's a lot of words. There's no pictures, and working with the director, finding out the film he wants to make, you kind of assemble a world for the actors, and if that world helps them, we've succeeded. You know, I have some good friends, they say, you know, if we do our work right, you don't notice it. And if we do it right, it also helps inform the story and helps inform the actors.
If I could piggyback on that, I mean, I've never, you know, I don't want to speak hyperbolically, but to step onto what Jack Fisk said, it was like I went to Universal City a week ago, and that's going to sound disrespectful, but it's like the opposite of that, you know what I mean? It's like, shit, they're never going to let me back in there, but where, you know, it's like very unlived in, and here was, you know, just even that bowling sequence, the Bowl-O-Rama sequence, I mean, that was just a joy to step into that day and see how they did it and see the before and after. And I love how Jack just put it. I never heard that before, but, you know, you almost don't want to notice it in a sense. You know, nothing poked out like, oh, this is where the Truman Show wall you never hit, you know? It was, the level of detail was extraordinary.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, to make this film work, we needed to give a real world to Marty. So he wasn't in a costume drama for the 50s, it just wouldn't have worked. So that was Josh's desire, and it's always my desire to kind of make a documentary of the period of what we were and doing. And that gave us a good guideline.
Yeah, well, again, like watching on the big screen, you know, you see these details, like all the storefronts. Like there's a great scene, there's a great shot where you're running, you know, just like flying down the street and passing by storefront after storefront, and then you cross the street to another side, and all the storefronts just look not only authentic, but you know, to your point, just like lived in. I mean, they you know, aged. And I'm just wondering if you talk a little bit about like how you approach something like that when you've got to dress an entire street and turn it into the 50s.
It becomes a challenge. When we first went down there to the Lower East Side, I looked and every building was covered with graffiti, which didn't exist. And they all had garage doors coming down in front of the shops so that, you know, they wouldn't be burglarized. There were new signs and parking meters and restaurants and stuff built in the street because of COVID. So I realized then we had our work cut out for us. But I want to cut back to what you were saying about the casting, that the more interesting faces that Josh brought in the casting and in the extras. I mean, he would find people sitting in a park and he'd go, what's your name? Or how do I reach you in 3 years when I do my film? But that put a lot of pressure on us to make the sets more real. Because if you take these characters, they're so real, and if you take Timmy's performance, which is so real, and you put him in an artificial set, it's not going to work. So I was getting pressure from a lot of areas.
Well, and Timothy, what's it like for you as an actor? You know, you've got this real spectrum of people you're playing opposite, from people like Gwyneth Paltrow, who's obviously very established, to someone like Abel Ferrara, who is in the film industry but not an actor, to a ton of non-professional actors that Josh has put in there. And I'm just curious how that affects your process, and do you work differently with the different types of actors? Do different types give you things that the others don't?
No, I loved it. I think the only real challenge on a technical level I could describe is that sometimes the light goes out. You know, if you're working with someone professional, the light's always going to be on in a sense. And but I love that. You know, I'm really not at the school of acting or thinking that went to conservatory. I have a tremendous respect for people that went to conservatory, but I think acting's in the cracks of life. I think to say you're a professional actor is almost stretching the word. You know, we're supposed to be reflections of humanity, no matter how pretentious and cheesy that sounds. It's really what we're getting at. So I loved it, you know, and if anything, I felt like the responsibility was on me, if as the sort of central character in the plot, to make sure people, you know, it's almost like acting with kids, or if you're not on, that would happen to me when I shot Wonka. You know, if I wasn't on, they're not giving you anything back. You know, like, you're clearly not doing a good job. So we had a scene with Ratso in the movie who plays my uncle. He's fantastic. Bob Dylan gave him the name Ratso, and it was sort of a struggle in that scene where it was a confrontation with him, and then when it came to life, it was extraordinary. There's another sequence in the film, I was really getting into someone's face and they wouldn't get angry with me. And I was saying to Josh, man, this one guy wouldn't get angry with me. And the guy said to me, hey, I was just in jail for 25 years. Like, you don't want to fuck with me, man. Like, basically, you don't want to see me angry. I said to Josh, who you got me acting with, man? This is crazy, man. But it kept you on your toes, you know.
You must have had a great face, though.
Absolutely. And he was great in the movie.
Well, speaking of being on your toes, I mean, Jack, last time I talked to you, I got the impression that you guys were really moving fast on this movie. And I'm wondering if that kind of speed, like, you know, does that sort of find its way into the DNA of the movie a little bit? And does it sort of force you guys, like is there a positive? I know people complain that there's never enough time, there's never enough money, but does it sort of, for both of you, like, put you in a situation where you're maybe operating on instinct a little more?
I think that we all operate on instinct. After you go through a period of research and soul searching for the film, you have to rely on your gut, because you don't have time to think. You know, we're going so quickly that you have to trust yourself. New York is an exciting city to work in. It's filled with millions of people, and everything is moving fast. And we were shooting on a large part of it, so we had to keep up. And Josh was just like, he was pushing, he was asking for more, and creating excitement about it that nobody wanted to disappoint him. And it made it fun. And like I even say, driving in New York is fun. It's like you're in a video game or something. If you cut somebody off, if you do it well, they don't get upset with you. They go, yeah, I'll get you on the next one.
Yeah, I mean, how about you, Timothy, like in terms of the pace and energy?
Well, I love how you framed that question. I never really thought of it like that before, which is to say that the stress of the shoot, you're almost suspicious of that tone creeping in. And I think that was true. I think I did worry at times, you know, is the live wire nature of what's going around this going to influence what's on screen here? And then I guess the positive is the tone is frenetic, you know. But, you know, based on that line of thinking, the moments I'm most proud of in this movie, I think, are the ones where, you know, another vibe almost creeps in or something. I love the scene with Bella in the restaurant, and I'm paying for Kevin's bill, and I just like the Marty tone there, because the rest of the movie can be so frenetic, and that one's kind of a calmer. It's still cocky and abrasive, but it's a calmer tone, you know.
Well, Jack, there's so many different sets and locations in this movie I could ask you about, but one I want you to talk about a little bit is Lawrence's, because that's such a cool set, and I wonder if you talk a little bit about, you know, is that based on a real place, and what kind of research did you have to do to build that?
Lawrence, for me, in the beginning, was the key. I'd read about it in Marty Supreme's book, but the building didn't exist anymore. We found pictures of it from the old tax records. Sarah, the wife and producer of Josh Softy, was helping us with research. She found through the city blueprints of the original building, and she also found black and white photographs from an old Look magazine, I believe it's Look article. And we were able to put together with the blueprints, the written history I've read of the place, Marty's. Before it was a ping pong parlor, it was an indoor golf course in New York. And that kind of blew my mind. And they had landscapes painted on the walls for the golfers so that they would think they were out in the country. And we recreated those in the space. We found a warehouse that was similar in size. And we used a little bit of some 16 millimeter color footage to get the red on the floors and the blues on the walls. And then we put those big ping pong tables in there, table tennis tables, and just started to take on a tone. Josh wanted it was described in some of the research, but a cage in the middle where they turned on the lights and collected money. And
Curious to hear from each of you, like, what was your favorite set?
It might have been I don't want to get this wrong. I think it's the former New Jersey Nets home arena, which is the Izod Center in New Jersey, and it was where the British table tennis, the British Open, for lack of a better expression, is in the beginning of the film, the World Championships, and I just loved it. I love how they retrofitted it. I loved the 1950s vibe of it. I loved hearing the announcer boom over almost like it was Wimbledon or something. I love the sound design on that scene too, where they go, "Let's go America!" And that's not a very sophisticated answer, but I just loved that. And also, because I'm a basketball fan, so I was like, wow, you can find pictures of Michael Jordan playing there online, and I'm playing table tennis. It's awesome.
that was a big set too. I think my favorite set was just almost the opposite. It was the smallest set in the film. At the end of the last day of shooting, they still needed a shot with Marty and his girlfriend making a phone call to about the dog. We had no money, but we had some used, some 50s cars that we were using. And I remember talking to the producer. I said, well, if you can bring those cars over this parking lot and I string up some lights and we rent a telephone booth, we can create a used car lot. And we did that in in a couple of hours. They were shooting, it was the last day of shooting. They came out of the soundstage, walked across the street to the parking lot. It was all set up, and they shot Timothy and Oceana. And I love that. To me, is the magic of cinema, when you have no money, but you have a lot of desire, and you go ahead and do it.
Well, it's a really great movie, and I'm just curious, before we wrap up here, did you guys know what you had while you were shooting? I mean, I know you've talked about Josh Sapty's exuberance and all that kind of stuff, but did you get a sense that you were working on something special?
There was a sizzle reel towards the end that Josh showed all of us. He showed us at the perfect time. I think everyone had no energy left. There was 3 weeks left, and he showed us a sizzle reel, and everyone's spirits gathered again in a good way. But I can't say yes confidently. This felt like a comet, and there was no real reference point, in 1950s table tennis thriller heist movie. So, it felt awesome to all of us, but I don't know. I think the reception, none of it's taken for granted, and it's just been awesome to see it resonate, because it's like that bathtub scene, or the fact that there's 80s music across a 1950s movie. There's so many things you could go like, that's where it's going to explode, and for whatever reason, because of Josh, it all came together beautifully.
Yeah, I think that for me, I can only get the energy to do what we have to do if I think it's going to be the best movie ever made. And I sort of approach it like that. And I was reconfirmed every day when I would see Josh's choices, when I would see Timothy's choices, and then when, like Timothy said, he showed us some of the footage, I go, I told you so.
Yeah, well, it's a terrific movie, and I really appreciate both of you taking the time to come out and talk with me.